Hi, I'm Sophia. Lately, my life has felt like a roller coaster ride. To be honest, I never thought I'd share all of this, but life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect it. I'm 31 years old and work as a marketing executive. Up until recently, I thought I had my life all sorted out. Ethan and I had lived together for 2 years before getting married, working hard and saving up for the wedding we both wanted. A little over a year ago, I finally married Ethan, my college sweetheart. We were so happy, so sure we were building something solid, and it felt like we were on top of the world. Shortly after our second anniversary, we got some incredible news. I found out I was pregnant. It was our little secret, and we were beyond excited. One evening, I couldn't keep the joy inside anymore. I turned to Ethan and said, "Can you believe it? We're going to be parents." I could barely contain my excitement. Ethan pulled me into a big hug, his eyes shining. "I know, Sophia. It's amazing," he said with a soft smile. "But remember, we should keep it quiet until after the first trimester." He was calm and thoughtful, reminding me to be cautious, and I agreed. But keeping this huge secret was a lot harder than I expected, especially around Ethan's family. Speaking of Ethan's family, that's a whole different story. There's Margaret, my mother-in-law. She's a nice person, but she can be a bit much. Margaret still treats Ethan like he's a kid who needs her constant attention and advice. Then there's George, Ethan's dad. He's usually quiet and doesn't really get involved in family matters. Ethan also has 2 siblings. His sister Lauren often acts like I'm her competition. She gives me these looks, almost like I stole something from her. His brother Brandon barely talks to me, as if I'm not even there. Family gatherings are, to put it mildly, a bit challenging. Take last Wednesday's lunch, for example. Ethan and I were getting ready, and Margaret suddenly noticed a small wrinkle on his shirt. "Ethan, honey, your shirt's wrinkled." "Sophia, don't you know how to use an iron?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to make me wince. I felt a wave of irritation but managed to keep my cool. "I'll double-check next time, Margaret," I replied with a forced smile. As if that wasn't enough, Lauren jumped in. "Oh, Sophia, don't worry about it. Not everyone's meant to be a homemaker," she added with a smirk. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I held back, refusing to let them see how much their comments bothered me. Later that evening, I called my best friend Camille to vent. "If Margaret makes one more snide comment about my housekeeping, I'm going to lose it," I groaned. Camille's laughter filled the phone. "Girl, you married Ethan, not his mother. Just tell her to back off," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I wish it were that simple," I sighed. "Ethan hates conflict, and I don't want to make things worse. But sometimes it's so hard to deal with this." Despite everything, I knew I loved Ethan and wanted to make things work. But right now, I was figuring out how to balance being a wife, future mom, and just myself, all while handling family dynamics I never anticipated. Camille, always the voice of reason, told me, "Sophia, you need to stand up for yourself, especially now that you're having a baby." I knew she was right. But the thought of speaking up made me feel sick, though to be honest, it could have also been the morning sickness. As the weeks went by, it became harder and harder to keep the pregnancy a secret. One night, Ethan and I were lying in bed, and he looked at me with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Sophia, I think it's time. Let's tell them about the baby at the family dinner next week," he said, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep our happy news just between us, safe from Margaret's constant judgment and Lauren's sideways glances. But I knew we couldn't hide it forever. "Okay," I said, trying to sound confident. "Let's do it." Still, something in my chest tightened. I knew they'd act pleased, smiles, hugs, congratulations, but beneath that surface, I could already hear Margaret's voice picking things apart. What I should eat. What I shouldn't. How much weight I could gain. What kind of birth plan was acceptable. I could practically see her taking over before we'd even left the dinner table. And Lauren? She'd find a way to make it about herself, she always did. Even as I agreed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this announcement would change everything. Little did I know how right I was. And just how wrong things would turn out. The day of the family dinner finally arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours cooking, hoping, naively, that I might impress Margaret, though deep down I knew that was probably a dream. Sure enough, as soon as we sat down, Margaret had something to say. "Sophia dear, the roast is a bit dry. Did you forget to baste it?" she asked, her voice sugary but sharp. Then, barely a breath later, she poked at her food again and added, "And these potatoes, they're a bit dry too. Did you use butter and milk, or just margarine?" The way she said margarine made it sound like an insult. I forced a smile, every muscle in my jaw tight. "Yes, I did use butter and milk, but I'll keep your suggestion in mind," I said, swallowing my frustration. "And that dress, is it new? It looks expensive. If you're going to waste my son's money, the least you could do is buy it in your size, and maybe actually stick to that diet you're always talking about." Her eyes drifted down to my waist, full of thinly veiled judgment. I felt my face flush, burning with humiliation. Just then, Ethan cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, we have some news," he said. My heart pounded as he glanced at me for support. "Sophia and I, we're having a baby." There was a brief silence. Then everyone reacted at once. George, surprisingly, smiled. Brandon mumbled a quiet congratulations. Lauren looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. But Margaret's reaction took my breath away. "A baby?" she repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "That's surprising, considering Sophia was so vocal about not wanting children when you first got engaged. Isn't that what you told us, Ethan?" I stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice shaky. Margaret leaned forward, folding her hands like she was stating simple facts and not twisting the fact. "I'm just saying, first she claims she's not the motherly type, that she wants to focus on her career, and now, out of nowhere, she's pregnant?" I had never said that, but before I could respond, Lauren jumped in, clearly eager to pile on. "And not just that. Isn't it funny how this happens right after she finds out about your trust fund being available in 5 years? Plus, she just lost that contract at work, didn't she? Timing's a little convenient." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "I only found out about the trust fund last week," I said quietly, more to Ethan than anyone else. But Margaret waved that off. "Still. A surprise pregnancy right now? You have to admit, it looks suspicious." "We decided together," I said, feeling the sting of their judgment deep in my chest. "Over a year ago, we talked about starting a family." Even as I said it, I remembered something that made my stomach twist, the way Margaret and Lauren had once pushed the idea of me having children before I even finished college. At the time, it felt like acceptance. Now, I could see it for what it really was, pressure. An attempt to secure their influence over me, and to scare me before the wedding. A way of letting me know they called the shots, not me. But back then, Ethan had taken my side. He told them it was our decision, and he wouldn't let anyone rush me into anything. I thought that meant I could trust him. I thought that meant he'd always stand up for me. But the happy moment was gone. Margaret suddenly stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "If you're really pregnant, prove it," she said. Her words hung in the air, slicing through what should have been a joyful evening. "You want me to prove I'm pregnant? You want me to pee on a stick right here?" I asked, stunned and furious. "Don't be crude, Sophia. A proper DNA test would be fine," she replied coldly, her arms folded like a judge issuing a verdict. I turned to Ethan, silently pleading with him to say something, anything, to defend me. Instead, he looked torn, his eyes flicking back and forth between his mother and me. After a long, gut-wrenching pause, he said softly. Maybe it's not such a bad idea, Sophia. Just to settle everyone's doubts. My heart dropped. He wasn't just hesitating, he was entertaining the idea that they might be right. This is crazy. I'm leaving, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of humiliation and disbelief. I turned to go, but Margaret stepped in front of me, her expression hardening. If you walk out that door, we'll all know you're lying, or hiding something. Is Ethan even the father? She snapped. Get out of my way, Margaret. I shouted, my voice rising and shaking with rage. Sophia drove to her best friend's place, the tears slipping silently down her cheeks as the headlights blurred in her vision. Her hands trembled on the wheel. She kept replaying it all, Margaret's accusation, Lauren's smug expression, and worst of all, Ethan's silence. How could he just stand there? Why didn't he follow me? Did he think I was lying? That he might not even be the father? By the time she pulled into Camille's driveway, her chest ached from holding it all in. The second the door opened, Camille took one look at her and pulled her into a hug. Oh honey, Camille whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around her. That bastard. That whole family. Sophia broke down in her arms, sobbing into her friend's shoulder as Camille held her and muttered a string of creative insults aimed squarely at Ethan, Margaret, and Lauren. They sat together for hours, Camille listening, Sophia unraveling, and when the storm of tears finally settled, a plan took shape. I'll get the test, Sophia said quietly, voice hoarse but steady. I'll prove it. And then Ethan will have to choose me and his child, or his mother and sister. He can't have both. Camille nodded fiercely. Good. Make him see the truth. And if he still picks them? Then he never deserved you in the first place. The next day, Sophia made a doctor's appointment for the DNA test. It wasn't something she should have had to do, but it was necessary now. Camille had insisted she stay in her guest room for as long as she needed. You're not going back to that house until you're ready, she said firmly. Sophia agreed. But first, she needed to collect a few things. Some extra clothes. Her laptop. Makeup. Essentials for keeping up with the few smaller clients she still had left. She had already lost her biggest account, thanks to Margaret. Her mother-in-law had made it her mission to micromanage Sophia's every move, calling her office constantly to check whether Sophia was assisting Ethan or handling things at home. Tasks Ethan was perfectly capable of doing himself. The interruptions hadn't gone unnoticed. Eventually, her bosses had told her, gently but firmly, that it might be better if someone else handled the firm's top client. Ethan had said his mother was just trying to be helpful, not fully understanding just how many calls I was receiving from her. It stung. But she wouldn't be defeated. She still had work, and she still had a plan. As she and Camille pulled up the familiar driveway, neither of them was surprised to see Margaret and Lauren already there, hovering beside Ethan, who sat slumped on the porch steps. The women flanked him like vultures, whispering in his ear. Maybe she ran to the baby's real father, Margaret hissed. Lauren nodded, smirking. She probably doesn't even know who it is. The second Sophia stepped out of the car and opened the door, they pounced. Where were you all night? Margaret snapped. Who were you with? Lauren added, eyes narrowed. Don't get your little friend to lie for you, Margaret sneered. You were with the real father, weren't you? Sophia froze, heart pounding, but Camille stepped forward without missing a beat. She was with me, you toxic parasite, Camille said coolly. Try saying that again, and I'll have you slapped with a harassment charge. Sophia pushed past them, ignoring their biting words and the heat rising in her chest. She stepped into the house she once called home, and they all followed close behind like a pack, still demanding answers. Just admit it, Sophia, Lauren said sharply. Stop playing games and tell the truth. Margaret snapped. Their voices chased her through the entryway, but Sophia refused to turn around. Camille stayed by the door, arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. Finally, Ethan stood up. His voice was quieter than theirs, but it carried weight. "Enough," he said. "All of you, stop." He turned to Sophia. Are you staying?" Sophia looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a fresh wave of exhaustion wash over her. "No," she said calmly. "I'm just here to get my things. I've made a doctor's appointment, DNA test is scheduled for next Thursday." Silence fell over the room. Margaret and Lauren exchanged smug glances, clearly interpreting the test as a win. A validation of their cruelty. As Sophia headed up the stairs, she heard Lauren mutter, "Good. She needs to be put in her place." Margaret added, "Actions have consequences. Maybe this will teach her some respect." Camille, still standing in the foyer, stepped closer to them. "You two should be careful what you say," she said coolly. Upstairs, Sophia packed what she needed, clothes, her laptop, and the pieces of herself she hadn't already lost in this house. Sophia made her way down the hall, her arms full of clothes and her laptop bag slung over one shoulder. She walked toward the stairs, ready to leave this house, and all its venom, for good. Just as she reached the top step, the guest room door swung open. Lauren. She stepped out suddenly, eyes cold, face twisted in something between disgust and glee. Before Sophia could react, Lauren shoved her hard. Sophia's foot slipped. Her balance vanished. She tumbled forward. "Look out!" Lauren screamed, loud enough to echo through the house. Oh no, she tripped. But Camille had just reached the bottom of the stairs and had seen it all. Sophia's body landed hard, twisted awkwardly at the base of the staircase. Her head throbbed. Pain shot through her side. "Sophia!" Camille shouted, rushing forward, her voice trembling with panic and fury. "Don't move, just stay still." From upstairs, Lauren's fake concern dripped like poison. "Is she okay?" It looked like she lost her footing. Camille spun around, her eyes blazing. "You lying psycho, I saw you push her." Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable, but her silence said everything. Not surprise. Not denial. Just calculation. Ethan rushed over the moment he heard the crash, his face pale as he dropped to his knees beside Sophia. "Call 911. He shouted. "Someone, call an ambulance." He turned toward Lauren, frantic. "What happened? What did you do?" Lauren put on her most innocent face, eyes wide. "She tripped. She was carrying too much stuff, it slipped out of her arms, and she fell." "Ethan. I tried to catch her." Camille, shaking with rage, stepped forward. "No. No, that's not what happened. I saw her push Sophia. She didn't trip." Lauren shoved her. Ethan stood, torn between the women. His face twisted in disbelief. "You must be mistaken, Camille. My sister would never. What you saw was her trying to help. Right?" He turned to Lauren. Lauren nodded quickly, a smug little smile curling at the corners of her mouth. "I reached out to grab her, I swear. You think I'd push your wife down the stairs?" The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. When the medics arrived and began lifting Sophia carefully onto the stretcher, one of them looked down, his voice turning clinical but urgent. "She's bleeding," he said. "Is she pregnant?" Camille answered, her voice breaking. "Yes. Yes, please, just help her." Ethan's face went white. And still, Lauren stood at the top of the stairs, arms folded, watching it all unfold like it was a show she had written. Sophia stirred awake, the beeping of hospital monitors filling the room in a steady rhythm. Her body ached. Her head pounded. But the pain in her chest, the betrayal, was far worse. When her eyes fluttered open, Ethan and Camille were sitting beside her bed. Ethan leaned forward first. "Thank God you're awake," he said softly. Sophia, it was an accident. You tripped. Sophia blinked slowly, then turned her gaze to him. Her voice was quiet, but firm. No, Ethan. She pushed me. His face crumpled, like he'd just been slapped. No, he whispered. Lauren would never, she said she tried to catch you. You were carrying too much. Camille leaned forward now, eyes sharp. Ethan, I told you, I saw it. She didn't reach out to help. She shoved her. Ethan shook his head, clearly spiraling. Then Camille's eyes lit up. Wait. The cameras. Didn't you install cameras last year after your neighbors were robbed? Ethan looked up, stunned. Yes, he said slowly. There's one in the hallway, and two facing the doors, the kitchen and front door. He stood, already reaching for his phone. The footage will show how Lauren tried to save you, you'll see. It'll clear this all up. Ethan was unlocking his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened the security app. The footage will show how Lauren tried to save you, you'll see. It'll clear this all up, he repeated, clinging to his version of the truth. But before he could tap the screen, the door opened. A doctor stepped in, his face solemn. Sophia, he said gently, glancing between her and the others. I'm so sorry, but we couldn't save the baby. The room fell silent. The walls felt like they were closing in. I'm sorry, the doctor continued. You suffered a significant fall. You have a concussion, a broken leg, and there was internal trauma. We'll need to keep you overnight for observation. Camille reached for Sophia's hand, tears already filling her eyes. Ethan stood frozen, the phone still in his hand, the security footage forgotten, for now. The doctor's words still hung in the air like smoke, thick, choking, impossible to escape. Sophia stared at the ceiling, her face pale and still, her body motionless except for the tears silently slipping down her cheeks. Camille sat beside her, holding her hand tightly, her own face etched with pain and fury. Ethan stood there, stunned, phone still in hand. His voice broke the silence. Lauren. Lauren will be devastated when she hears this. Both Camille and Sophia turned on him at once, voices rising in perfect, furious unison. Get out. The words rang out like a slap. Ethan flinched, as if finally realizing just how far he'd fallen in their eyes. Camille stood, pointing to the door. She should be devastated. But not nearly as devastated as Sophia is. And not nearly as much as she should be punished. Now leave. Without another word, Ethan turned and walked out, his world finally cracking open beneath him. Ethan sat in the hospital waiting room, numb. He stared at the floor, hands clasped together, trying to make sense of it all. She lost the baby, he said quietly. Margaret gasped, but it was theatrical. Lauren, seated beside her, scoffed. Well, that's convenient. Ethan looked up slowly. Margaret crossed her arms. Oh, come on, Ethan. She was never really pregnant. We all knew it. This whole fall down the stairs? Just a dramatic way to escape her little lie. Ethan stared at them like he was seeing them for the first time, not as the mother and sister he grew up loving, but as strangers with ice in their veins. He said nothing. Just stood. And walked away. As he reached the far end of the hallway, he pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. His thumb hovered over the hallway footage from earlier that day. Margaret followed behind, heels clicking. What are you doing, Ethan? He didn't look at her. Checking the footage. From the hallway camera. The color drained from her face. Lauren, who had just caught up, froze in place. You have cameras inside the house? She stammered. Ethan finally turned to them, eyes unreadable. Yes, he said flatly. And they've been recording everything. The hallway went still. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came out. Lauren's face drained of color completely, her smugness replaced by panic. Ethan turned the screen toward himself and pressed play. The silence between them now wasn't just awkward, it was damning. Back in Sophia's hospital room, the silence was thick, but not empty. It was a silence filled with decision. Camille sat close, holding Sophia's hand gently. "I can't stay married to him," Sophia finally said, her voice low but resolute. "He chose their lies over my safety. Over our baby." Camille nodded, her eyes wet but proud. "You don't have to explain it to me. You're doing the right thing." Sophia exhaled slowly, pain flashing across her face, not just physical, but deep in her chest. "I'm filing for divorce. And I'm pressing charges against Lauren. She pushed me. She killed my baby." Camille squeezed her hand. "Then we'll make sure she pays for it." Back in the waiting room, Ethan sat rigid, his phone in his hand, the security footage playing silently yet screaming the truth. On screen, he watched Lauren slip into the guest room, lurking, waiting. He could hear Sophia upstairs, moving toward the stairs, unaware. Then came the shove. The sharp cry. The sickening thud. And the part that made him physically recoil, the cold, satisfied smirk on Lauren's face as she stood at the top of the stairs, calling out for help while smiling as if she'd just won. His stomach twisted. He paused the footage, breathing hard, then switched to the next clip, footage from earlier that day in the kitchen. The camera didn't catch their faces, but the audio was clear. Lauren's voice, "She needs to be put in her place." Then Margaret, "It would be tragic if she fell down the stairs." Ethan's hand trembled. He turned slowly toward his mother and sister, who stood silently behind him, watching the screen. He looked at them like strangers. No, like monsters. "You planned this," he said, his voice hollow. "You wanted to hurt her." Neither of them spoke. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized he wasn't protecting his family. He was protecting the people who destroyed his family. Margaret was the first to speak, her voice cold and urgent. "If you erase this footage, it'll be fine. No one will ever believe them." Ethan was too stunned to respond. Lauren jumped in, her tone defensive but sharp. "We never really thought she was pregnant. We just figured she'd bump her head and it would all blow over. There's no need for anyone to ever see this footage." The words hit Ethan like a slap, but this time, they ignited something inside him. He took a steadying breath and found his voice. "I'm calling the police." Without another word, he turned and walked briskly back toward Sophia's room, fingers flying across his phone, downloading the footage and sending a copy to Camille. Behind him, Margaret and Lauren followed, their voices rising in desperation. "This is a family thing. There's no need to involve the police." But Ethan didn't look back. As Ethan entered the room, Sophia and Camille shot him death glares. Ethan's voice wavered as he began to speak, stumbling over his words. I'm so sorry. You were right. I've sent the footage to Camille, and I'm calling the police." Sophia looked at him with a soft, bittersweet smile. "I'm glad you believe me now," she said quietly, "but I'm afraid I don't trust you anymore." She took a steadying breath. "Please leave the room. Don't come back until the police arrive. And on your way out, ask my doctor to come in." Ethan swallowed hard, nodded, and left the room without another word. Ethan walked purposefully up to the nurse's station. "Please send the doctor to my wife's room. She wants to speak with him. Also, can you call the police?" he asked firmly. Margaret jumped up, panic in her voice. No, that won't be necessary." But the nurse barely glanced at them, her tone professional and resolute. "I'll page the doctor now, and the police have been notified." As the nurse made the calls, Margaret hissed under her breath. "You're going to ruin your sister's life over some girl." Ethan turned sharply, eyes blazing. "She's not some girl. She's the love of my life. And because of you too, she doesn't trust me anymore. and now she's my ex-wife. Lauren's lips curled into a cold, bitter smile, the cruelest Ethan had ever seen on her face. Well, at least something good came out of this day, she sneered. A year passed. Sophia filed for divorce, and throughout it all, they had kept their finances separate, mostly because Ethan's family was so convinced she was after his money. The house, after all, was Sophia's home long before Ethan entered her life. She had inherited it from her father when she was just 21 years old. Years before she even knew Ethan's name. Ethan worked with their lawyers to make the whole process go smoothly, cutting ties with his mother and sister completely. His father divorced Margaret, unable to tolerate her cruelty any longer. Margaret managed to avoid criminal charges. The lack of visible evidence and an unidentifiable voice made it impossible to prove her guilt. But in a small town, word traveled fast. She was quietly removed from teaching Sunday school, asked to leave her book club, and her friends suddenly found other commitments on their weekly card game nights. Rumor had it they still played, but just not with Margaret. Lauren's fate was harsher. She was fired from her job. The company had strict policies against employees with criminal records, and no one wanted to work alongside the woman who had pushed her pregnant sister-in-law down the stairs. The damning footage made the case against her swift and undeniable. Her defense, that she didn't believe Sophia was pregnant and didn't think she would get hurt, fell flat in court. Lauren was sentenced to 6 months in jail, followed by 6 months of house arrest and 2 years of probation.